Thank you. All right, thank you. Yeah, so the flash, it's the accessory we love to hate. You know, there's it provides light in emergencies, but usually it's an ugly light and we don't like it. And some photographers, like my buddy David Middleton, make a moral superiority argument against using it. But I'm convinced my goal today is to get him to learn how to use his flash. So we've known each other for a long time, so I can bust him like that. But anyway, there's several important things to remember when you're using your flash. The tiny flash reflector will not light up a street or a stadium. You know, think of an on-camera flash as something to light up things right in front of you, more than 12 to 15 feet away, and flash becomes a weak and ugly searchlight. I know that on the dials on our Sony and Canon and Nikon flashes, it says it'll go out to 80 feet, but by the time it's 80 or 100 feet away, it's ugly light. Basically, the flash is good for something that's right in front of you. Think of your flash as the second light in a two-light setup. The first and primary light is the available light, whatever it is, sunlight, street lights, room lights, candles, etc. The key to natural-looking flash is to blend the flash with the available light. And the good news is that back in the prehistoric era, when David and I and some of my other compatriots here started photography, you used to have to think about doing this and calculate ratios and do all this kind of stuff. But the good news is that our flashes do this for us. Our cameras and flashes talk to each other now. They never used to talk to each other in the pre-digital age, and now they do. So they blend exposures. All you have to do is tell the flash to think that way. So we call that, basically, we're using the flash as a fill light, to fill in what available light isn't going to give us. So in outdoor photography, the fill flash is usually the sun. The sun is your main light source. Now this is really important, and if you have no other takeaway from this 2 days, and you take this away, you're going to be a better photographer. Film and digital media cannot see the same range of tones from pure white to pure black as can the human eye. In order to record natural-looking situations in bright, contrasty light with deep shadows, you need to lighten but not entirely eliminate the shadows. Our eyes have, I think, a dynamic range of about 14 stops. I think there are some of the newer Sony cameras that might have close to that, at least in the video realm. But back in the days of slide film, we had about 5 stops. I think most of us have about 6 or 7 stops. So we don't see, what you see is not what you get. And that's why every time you walk through a forest that's dappled with light, you know, sunlight coming through the forest, and it's so beautiful, and you take a picture of it, and it looks like you knocked over the pepper shaker on a white napkin, and you wonder, why does this picture so ugly? It was so beautiful. It's too much contrast. The chip just can't handle it. Now, most contemporary flash and camera systems do this automatically if you set the always on setting or the flash on or the fill flash, whatever your brand camera, whatever it is, it's a force flash, so the flash is going to fire all the time, even in bright light. So let's take a look at some situations where that fill flash helps. Anytime you have to shoot people out in the harsh sunlight, and I don't care if it's darker African-American skin tones, the flash is going to help to open up those shadows and make it printable or publishable, but it goes for Anglo, you know, Caucasian, whatever. You still need to pop in a little flash to make it printable and publishable. And this is easily done by just telling your camera that you want this flash to fire, even in the bright sunlight. Lots of situations can be improved by the addition of flash. Here we have these cute little girls in a face painting. I turn them away from the light. They're backlit, but there's not a heck of a lot of fill there. So now we just pop up the little on-camera flash, and we fill them in that way, and bingo, we've got the cute picture. But this ability for the flash to fill in outdoors and do it without you calculating and having to do ratios and pull Polaroid tests and everything makes things like, this is from the Papua New Guinea Sing Sing. Now you look deep into their eye sockets, there's no detail, there's no nothing. You pop a little flash in, and now you've got a publishable picture. So this fill flash, it's a tremendous tool to help you get pictures in the times of day and the type of light where you'd ordinarily have to walk away. I can't tell you how many midday parades I passed up in the film mirror because I said, it's just too harsh, too contrasty, or I was doing setup portraits in the shade instead of trying to actually cover the event. But knowing that you've got this flash, and you know, so many of us, we get our full frame cameras and we say, you know, oh, my camera shoots beautiful, low noise, ISO up to 12,800, or I mean, my Sony A7S, I was shooting video at 25,600. I don't care about how high and how good your video or your ISO is. You still need flash to change the quality of the light. And here's an example. We've got a lady down in Savannah. She gives tours in the outfit in these Victorian outfits, but she's standing in the shade. It's overcast behind, but it's still brighter. But we bounce a little flash into a little fill flash into a reflector that my wife Peggy is holding off to the side, and we've got a nice portrait. Now, I don't care how high your ISO is going to go, you cannot change the ratio between how bright that is at the fountain and how dark it is on her. I can overexpose for her, but then the fountain gets blown out. But if I want both her and the fountain, I have to use a little flash, and I want to make it off camera and bounced so it's nice and soft. If you're a nature person, the blue iguana down in the Caymans is known for its bloodshot red eyes, but you're not going to see it until you throw in a little fill flash. So this is one of the most useful properties that we have, whether you're shooting critters, people, whatever it is. So I say, you know, I love available light too, and available light is always my first go-to. Window light is my favorite portrait light. You know, I'll move people into the window light or whatever. But when that fails, the difference between, you know, a working photographer and a non-working photographer is the photographer who can then go and solve that problem and go to the next step and create your own light. Now, in the old days, when we did this with film and we didn't have you know, an LCD to check, sometimes you had to depend on other cues. And I was shooting down in Trinidad. I was shooting this trinket salesman, and he was in the shade of a palm tree on a bright sunny beach. And I said, oh no, this is not going to work. It's just, you know, it's too contrasty. So I put my flash in, but I didn't seat it right, and I heard it go boom. You know, it just put out a full blast, and I just could hear, because I couldn't check because this is film, I could hear that it was too much flash, and I noticed that I didn't have it seated right. I pushed it in. Now all the contacts are talking to each other, and we get the Goldilocks just right, you know, the mix between, you know, too much flash, not enough flash, and that right combination. But the ability to use the flash and to even think to use it is useful anytime you're shooting people in the middle of the day. The little catch light in her eye there is due to the flash. Little catch light in the parrot's eyes. You know, whether you're shooting wildlife or people, it's a very, very useful example. So we have, this was from an assignment to shoot for some college magazine, and this girl had won a trophy. So we turned her away from the sun, and we hit some flash into one of those reflectors again, and we did some fill flash. So fill flash is really your friend outdoors in contrasty light. And I like to take the flash off the camera, use a little on-camera control, or, you know, I like to aim the flash towards a ceiling or a wall. And these new Sony units that just flip back and forth like that are really kind of cool, because you can, you know, use a whole side wall without turning the camera around and twisting the head and everything. But here, this is from a story about Savannah. That's Uga the Fifth, the sixth, the mascot of the University of Georgia. And I was actually shooting his owner, Sonny Seiler. I was shooting a story on the real-life characters of Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. And Sonny was the defense lawyer. There was the movie that Clint Eastwood directed with Kevin Spacey and John Cusack. Anyway, so I went to Sonny's house, and he's in charge of Uga. And I said, oh, you got to let me get a portrait of Uga. So he brings the dog out, puts her on the table, and then I shoot about 5 shots, and he says, that's enough, she's upset. And he sweeps her up in his arms, and he says, and he looks over at me, and he said, now remember, I have picture approval. You know, and he never liked this picture because the ears were down, but that's, you know. Off-camera Phil Flash story about Palm Springs. This is Kitty Cole Bang, a 6'6" transvestite, mayoral candidate. It's late in the afternoon. There's a highway behind her. I get low. I put the flash on a stand. I hit her with some flash, and bingo, I've got an environmental portrait using Phil Flash off camera. Just one little stand, one little flash. She came in second. The winner was a 6'8" transvestite. Only in Palm Springs, right? But it's just such a useful technique. This is from a story on Lake Winnipesaukee, and these are the croquet folks. And you can see that the flash is kind of filling in under their hats, and even throwing a little fill on the croquet balls themselves. And if you look closely on the left, you see the light stand leg there, sticking in out there. There was a frame where that wasn't in there, but I left it in for educational purposes. But anytime that you're shooting, you know, events down in the Caribbean or something in the middle of the day, that flash is on the camera in that Phil Flash mode. And again, we are allowed to kind of tailor it. We have the ability to do minus a third of a stop, minus 2/3 of a stop. Generally speaking, at least when this first started, most of our flashes coming out of Japan were tuned to a very high amount of Phil Flash, because that's more the look over in Asia. And over here we like it a little more subtle, but we can do that. I usually find if I keep my flash, now I have just recently migrated from Nikon to Sony, and I'm knowing my way around the Sony flashes now, and I'm finding that a minus 2/3 is usually the kind of look that I like. But Phil Flash in the middle of the day is going to save you in a lot of sunny situations where it's just going to add a little sparkle. But even in overcast, this is from a story about the French Quarter. She's an old Russian ballet mistress. She loves the color lilac purple. She dressed in it and everything. And I got a shot of her with her 2 little poochies. And I was just hitting her with a little flash through a little white umbrella, just to put the catch lights in the eyes and to bring the level of light up to match what was hitting the back of her house there. So even in overcast. Right here in New York City, I did a story on 5th Avenue for the German edition of National Geographic Traveler magazine. This is one of the Hackney drivers. And you can see up on top, it's a dull overcast day, but I have the flash in my hand. I'm hitting him with a little flash. The red leather is really popping, and it really adds a little twinkle in his eye. You know, and so this is an absolute necessary tool, I think, for those of us who work with people especially. But even when you're out on your safari, I will keep the flash in the bag. And we came across a rare daylight sighting of a leopard, and the late afternoon sun's coming in there. But it's one of those splotchy situations where you've got these bright highlights and deep shadows. The flash opened it up and almost made it look like a studio portrait. But you can see, if you look very closely, you can see there's 2 catch lights in the eye. One is from the flash and one is from the sun. So we've all heard about slow sync flash, right? What is it? Well, slow sync flash is Phil Flash in low light. The shutter speed drops to record the ambient light in the background. The flash fills in where needed. Now, if it's a dark room and the shutter speed drops, you're gonna start to get some blur. And in order not to get too much blur, you may need to use a tripod, even though you're using the flash. But we will see how we can use that blur to some artistic effect a little later in the presentation. Slow sync flash retains the natural look of the scene, and you don't get that perp walk photo of a brightly lit subject swimming in darkness. You know those old Ouija photographs of the guys coming out of the courtroom? I feel like I'm in a perp walk photo right now because I have these two lights blinding on me, you know, and it's like harsh light on the foreground and then everything else is floating dark in the background. That's when we shoot at our higher sync speeds. Now, for those of you who don't know what a sync speed is, it is the fastest shutter speed that will coordinate with the pop of the light. So your shutter curtains open, the flash pops, and then they close. So the fastest shutter speed that can happen at in your particular brand of camera, it's usually about 200, 250 these days, is called the sync speed. And most of us tend to shoot at that sync speed. But we can go slower. We can lower that. So when the shutter stays open, the flash goes, the shutter stays open a little longer, and then it closes. And by staying in longer, it's burning in the background. And we'll see what that looks like. Here's a typical situation of a woman shot. There's an off-camera flash through an umbrella, but there's no sense of place. Her skin tones are pretty good and everything, but there's no sense of place behind it. It's shot at a 2/50th of a second. Here we do the same thing and we drop it to about an 1/8 of a second, and we see all the lamps in the background burn in, and we can see a little about her environment. And you know, I do a lot of travel photography. That's kind of what the moniker that has been put on me. Lately I've been doing a lot of video and stuff, but travel photography and the kind of pictures that we use and we look for are the kind of pictures that not only show what a place looks like, but what it feels like. So if we can get evocative lighting that doesn't ruin the mood, that's what we want. So we get something like this. We're in Santuario de Chimayo, outside of Santa Fe. We see this nice young lady in the local dress, ask permission to photograph it, pop up the flash and shoot it. And yep, that's a pretty clinical, kind of ugly flash shot that we typically get when we don't know how to do our flash. That's with the little pop-up flash in a cheap body. But simply by telling the camera, hey, I want to go to slow sync, look what happens. Same cheap little pop-up flash, same situation. It drops the shutter speed down. It opens up the shutter a little longer, so now all the warm light of the candles kind of burn in, and we get a little more detail in the lace, and now we've got a picture that starts to feel like something. Now, in my heart of hearts, I would love to shoot something like this way, where you're just using available light from the candles. But look at the lower, like right corner there. That's a whole cartridge of Epson black right there. If you make an 8x10, that's a $40 8x10. It just sucks all that black ink out, and you know, and the toilet paper that most magazines are printed on these days, that's gonna like ruin the page. It's unpublishable, it's unprintable. But I like the feel. So now I'm gonna get a little more sophisticated with my flash. I'm not gonna use the pop-up flash or the plug-in controller as the main flash. I'm gonna use that as a controller. I'm gonna take my other flash, I'm gonna put it down, I'm gonna put an orange gel on it because candlelight is down in the 1,000 Kelvin, but most of our flash tubes are balanced for midday sunlight. So if I didn't gel it, it would look like a searchlight, an LED searchlight from the police are going in there. I'm gonna gel it, and I'm gonna hit her with some slow sync, with some low angle, and now that's only about 1/3 of a cartridge of Epson black on the lower there, and it's publishable and printable. So you know, you're solving problems, and that's basically what a lot of professional photography has been in my life. It's been, you know, you go to these beautiful places and you're immediately presented with terrible problems. The weather stinks. They don't want to allow you in here. It's, you know, so much of professional photography is solving problems, and the flash and that command of the flash has helped me solve so many problems and get pictures where I ordinarily couldn't get them. Here's from a little brochure thing on a cruise liner. So we have the couple closing down the disco late at night, put a little orange gel on the flash, But there's no sense of what the disco looks like because it's shot at normal sync speed. But we drop that shutter speed down to about 1/8 of a second, and now we get a feeling of that mood. We get a little movement, a little blur. There's a lot of pet names for this. We call it shake and bake. We call it dragging the shutter because the shutter stays open and you're moving. And I usually find that this blur plus flash works best at one of 3 shutter speeds, a 30th, a 15th, or about an 1/8. If you get much slower, you lose entire portions of people's bodies. Now here's like a half second, and notice like she's lost a leg, he's lost his entire fanny, because it's too long a shutter speed. But a 30th, and if you shoot much faster than a 30th, you don't get any blur at all. But a 30th, a 15th, 1/8 and 15th of a second, kind of my sweet spot for shooting these kind of shake and bake, dragging the shutter. Here's a Dogon warrior, and he's running right past me. His troop is dancing out in the middle of the village, and he runs right past me, and I just pan with the wide angle, and I had the camera on for flash, and we get a little of the blur, but we get a nice sharp image of the Dogon warrior and Molly running right past me there. The Catman in Key West, it's twilight. We hit him with a little flash, and in this case, I had to go on camera. It was surrounded by a big crowd, so I didn't have anybody to hold my flash or anything. But it just, otherwise I would have to shot this as a silhouette. But now we get the nice rich blue sky, we get the cat, we get the guy's face and everything because of this on-camera fill flash. A holy man in Varanasi in India, the flash on the camera lights him. The shutter stays open and burns in all those nice warm lights in the shops behind him. So you see it opens up portraiture in light where you ordinarily couldn't do it, unless you had a Lucy light from David Middleton's new nonprofit. How many of you saw David's? Yeah, fantastic, right? I still want him to learn to use flash. You think I can do it? I don't know. He's a stubborn man, but we're going to try. A thing like this a shot like this was shot for a story on Maria for National Geographic Traveler magazine, and it could only be done with slow sync flash because otherwise, all you'd see are their wrists there and the ring of fire. You would not see all those nice buff guys standing on top of each other doing this traditional Polynesian fire dance. The traditional Polynesian fire dance is featured in every Polynesian folklore show from Easter Island to Hangaroa to Honolulu. It was introduced to Polynesia in 1939 by an ancient Scottish hotelier named Aggie Gray. So that's how traditional. Always do your research to know what you're shooting. But it does make a hell of a nice picture, but it's about as traditional to Polynesia as, well, I don't know what, but anyway. So shake and bake, dragging the shutter here in India. You see how the flash freezes it, and then we get that feeling of movement. And it's a great way, this strobe and burn, dragging the shutter, great way to get a sense of movement into a still photograph. So it's something that you should really practice with, and it really, really will open up a whole new worlds and possibilities for you to photograph in the off light. Now this guy I see every time I go to that third vodka tonic at night. He just appears and says, "Have another one, have another one." No, this is I'm living down in the Philly area, and any of you guys, you New Yorkers, are always welcome to come down to Philly on New Year's Day for the Mummers Day Parade. Outrageous, unique thing that only happens in Philly. These wild bands with wild costumes and banjos and stuff, and they parade up and down all day for the TV cameras. But then at night, they go back to South 2nd Street, which they call 2 Street. And they party all night, and this is one of the band leaders, and he's right in front of me. I'm hitting him with a little flash, and I'm doing the strobe and burn there. So it's a wonderful technique. 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm not going to be able to shoot this any other way but with slow sync. this is July 4th down in Philly. So it just opens up a whole new world of being able to shoot portraits in less than ideal light. Now here's when you can take it off camera, it's even more dramatic. And this is, again, simply taking the flash off the camera, putting it into a little umbrella, and using a controller on the flash and just telling it to go into fill flash in slow sync mode. This was from that same story on Maria. This is Ronui. He's a tattoo artist. And you know, sometimes life is so much better than what you could make up. That's his father and his kids looking for muscles and stuff. And in the background, and I never could have thought to set that up, but they were just there and it just happened. And we shot about 15, 30 frames, and then the skies opened up and started to pour. But I had like about 20 keepers out of 25 frames. He was an amazing character. This is from a story I did for Smithsonian Magazine about a Russian iconographer restoring a church here on the west side of Manhattan. Way over in the West 50s, there's a church. And every night after he finished his paintings, he would light votive candles in memory of his mother. But if I just used the candlelight as the source, I would only light his wrist and everything else would be black. So I put the flash on the floor, used the wireless controller, put an orange filter on it to match the candlelight, put a little umbrella over it, and I simulated the candlelight. You know, if you look real carefully, you can see that the light is coming from the floor, not the candles, but it's the same direction, not you know, it's from underneath, and it retains the mood. So remember, we're looking for pictures that not only show what a place looks like, but what it feels like. We want to be able to use the flash and retain the mood of what we're doing. Story about Philly and flamenco dancing in downtown Philly. Here, there's a big white wall behind me, or to the side of me, and I just flip that Sony thing over this way, and bam, I have the whole wall as my fill and as my light source, and a slow shutter speed, and one on-camera flash, and I've lit an entire nightclub and frozen a flamenco dancer. I mean, from one little on-camera flash. So it's amazing what these little things can do. And in cahoots with good high ISO performance, you don't ever need to get one of those big plug-in flashes. In fact, I have some Dynalights for sale. If anybody wants to buy them, see me after class. They're only about 25 years old, but they're in great condition, just like me. You know. Okay, slow sync, no flash. Sent out to do a story on the Big Island of Hawaii for Islands Magazine. I go down to the tiki statues in the place of refuge. It's a ugly, 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 cloudy, the volcanoes are erupting, there's haze and everything. And it's mid-afternoon. They close the park at sunset. I don't know what I'm going to do. I got to make an evocative picture. So I start trying to think creatively. First of all, I wanted to go from gray to blue. So I changed my white balance from daylight to tungsten. So that's going to turn that gray sky blue. I underexpose a little behind the statues. Then my brother was the writer on this. And it's important when you work with a writer to give him something to do besides go to the bar. So I drag him along with me, and I give him my small flash with the orange filter and the little 20-inch umbrella, and I stand him up to the right, and I say, okay, here, we're going to do, now we've got our nice dramatic picture of, you know, the tiki statues. And this is shot at 3:30 on one of the ugliest, most overcast days I've ever seen in the tropics. But you know, Dan Westergren, one of our speakers on this thing and the senior photo editor of National Geographic Traveler, he has this little sign above his iMac, which keeps us all honest. And it says, and this is down at National Geographic Traveler, it says, "We publish pictures, not excuses." You don't go back and say, nah, the weather wasn't really right. I couldn't make a picture because I wasn't inspired. You know, the weather. You solve that problem, whatever the weather is, and you make the dramatic pictures. So you know, this kind of thing of going and shooting twilight and hitting it with a little flash, it's a very, very common technique, and it's very dramatic. And you can do it with the simplest of cameras. Now, this next illustration is with a pop-up with one of the little point-and-shoot cameras. just on slow sync, and it's down in one of those sea islands in Georgia, and it's just slow sync, and it's, you know, we get the captain there or the lighthouse keeper in the background of the lighthouse, but it's still the direction of the light from that little pop-up flash is a little frontal. It's a little stark. So I've done two things here. I took the flash off the camera and bounced it through an umbrella for this next one. And can anybody kind of guess what else I might have done? Yeah, changed it to tungsten to get that gray, go from gray to blue there. So we've gone now from a decent snapshot to a nice environmental portrait simply by, you know, using an off-camera flash, you know, changing, putting the orange filter on the flash, and then going to a very blue white balance. It's called, what is it called? Complementary filtration, where you do that. Yeah. Yeah, so you see the light from the pop-up flash is very frontal, but when you go off camera, you see now you have those nice molding shadows, plus it's being diffused. You know, there's this, I get these little 21-inch umbrellas, and I have this little handle that I use, and I put the Sony up there, and then I use a small, one of their smallest flashes as the wireless controller, and I just hold it up there, and I've made this little bracket. It has a wrist thing, and back in the day when Joe McNally and I were doing videos together, you know, Joe is the uber talented, uber popular guy, and he's got a deal with Lastalite. So I referenced him in a couple of my blogs where I was showing this thing. A year later, Lastalite comes out with the umbrella brolly handle, you know, that does the same thing, and they just couldn't call it the Bob Krist handle. They had they just, you know, but I was happy to donate that to my design for a handheld umbrella to science and to photography. We already figured out what else we did with the light. But here's a typical example, and when we talk about how fast flash falls off, it falls off geometrically. You know, the difference between if I stand here and I light this gentleman and he's at f11, well, this gentleman here is what, 4 feet away? He's going to be like f2. It falls off geometrically. It's called the law of inverse square. I slept through physics too, so I don't really know what the formula is, but all I know is that flash falls off tremendously fast. And here's a visual illustration of that. I'm down in North Carolina. I'm doing a little thing on duck carvers or duck decoy carvers, and here's a shot, direct flash, the decoy in the foreground, the carver in the background. Look how fast that flash falls off. The carver's knee is just about hitting the back of that sculpture, and you can't even see his face. Now, let's take the flash and put it into the corner of the room. And again, we're just twisting that Sony up and twisting it back, putting it into the corner of the room, doing a little slow sync bounce, and now we've got a publishable portrait. Not changing anything but where we're aiming the flash, from direct flash to indirect in the corner of the room, and now we've got a nice portrait. So you see just the simple manipulation of the direction and just dropping that shutter speed down a little for some slow sync so we register the windows and whatever is the difference between this and this. And this is the difference between not making a living, and this is the difference between eking out what little meager living professional photographers eke out anymore. You know, I noticed that the first question in almost 3 of these other presentations has always been about, did you get a model release? And I always say, don't worry about model releases. Most people who are smart know that photographers are so broke, there's no money to be made by suing us anyway. So, but no, I don't have a model release for him. But see, these kind of situations, I don't care how good your high ISO is, it's the balance and the quality of the light is not going to change unless you throw a little flash in there. So I have this little outfit that I make with this little flash, and I bought a children's arrow quiver to carry the umbrella in, and with my little handle, and I clip it onto my camera bag, and so I've got a little studio right on my gadget bag whenever I need it. And for a lot of these travel situations, it's the difference between, you know, making a good publishable picture and making a terrible picture. So using flash off camera and the slow sync is nice. This is a blues musician down in New Orleans, marchers at the Chingay procession in Singapore. You know, it's twilight. We're hitting them with a little slow sync flash, keeping that shutter open, 1/8 of a second, 1/15 of a second. Story about Japanese ryokan in the traditional inns in Japan. I wanted it to seem like the fire was lighting the man. So again, I put that small flash on the floor, orange filter, little umbrella, aimed up at his face to keep the feeling that it was coming from the fire, but it really wasn't. This is an outtake from the Renouy shoot. He was one of the most graceful people I've ever had in front of my camera. He just hit so many different, he spoke French only. My French is terrible, but he was just one of the greatest subjects I've ever had in terms of being just so relaxed in front of the camera. Some people just freeze up. Some people are kind of natural in front of the camera. But here's another situation where, again, the low light, you crank up your ISO, you're going to burn out everything behind it. So you, again, a small flash coming from off to the side and filling in there, and now you've got a publishable picture with nice soft light. More before and after from our face painting thing. This is no flash. This is on camera fill flash. That's an improvement, but the real improvement comes when you're filling the flash, but you're bouncing it through the umbrella. You can see the progress, the progression, you know, and a lot of photographers will get to that second area where they'll just bounce, they'll put the flash on the camera and aim it. But the people who are going to, you know, get those family portrait jobs over and over again are going to be the ones that take the flash off the camera, diffuse it, and really make a professional portrait out of it. Again, no flash, on camera fill flash, and off camera bounce fill flash. The high, you know, because we're using a larger light source, the light is softer. We can see bigger catch lights in the eyes. So it makes a huge difference. And the thing is, it's all done automatically. I mean, all this, the camera and the flash meters talk to each other. So it's not as much of an esoteric, art as it was back in the day when we used to have to do ratios and pull Polaroids and all that kind of stuff. I was talking at a camera club thing down in South Carolina, and I met this guy who made me look like a ballet dancer. And I said, "Hey, big fella, want to come up to my room?" Because I was doing this series of portraits. And he agreed without too many questions, actually. So I don't know. Don't let looks fool you. But all right, so this is the on-camera flash. You know, it's pretty ugly. You know, it doesn't make much of a picture. And now just taking the flash, bouncing it into the wall, and now it's a beautiful, warm, almost looks like a studio portrait. It was shot, you know, in a Holiday Inn, you know, and this was just before he knocked me over and robbed me. No, he is one of the nicest, gentle giant guys you ever want to meet. But the difference, I mean, look, the difference between that kind of picture, you know, and this is the difference, you know, pretty big difference. And it's simply by changing the direction and the orientation of the flash. It's nothing really magic. From that same series, this is a well-known Savannah jazz musician, and his name is escaping me now, but we've got an on-camera flash. I had like reflections in his glasses and reflections in the base, so I asked him to take his glasses off, but then we bounced the flash into a reflector from the side, and we've gotten now a nice portrait. So you know, you don't really need, you know, pro photos and Ellen Chromes and stuff to do this, you know, to get professional looking results. It's just knowing that the properties of your light and how to use it and how to mix and match the available light with the flash. And you can actually manipulate time the other way by underexposing the background instead of exposing for the background. This is Tent Rocks in Santa Fe. It's shot in normal fill flash, but let's say I want to, at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, let's say I want to make it look like twilight. So let's say I think that exposure was about a 60th at 5.6. I go to 250th, I'm underexposing, and now I've got like a little almost twilight thing going. So once we learn that we can manipulate the flash and control the background, we can go shoot day for night. This is a story about a guy who gave graveyard tours in New Orleans, except that they close all the graveyards at sunset, so I had to get in there and underexpose and throw a flash on him to make it look like it was nighttime. This is from a story I did for National Geographic on Malta. They would not let me bring these precious Bronze Age statues out to the temple at night, so I just underexposed severely and threw a lot of flash power on this to get a moody portrait here. This was another problem-solving event from that story about ryokan, the traditional inns. We were supposed to show a young couple checking in and how you go from you check in, you have tea, you take a bath, you eat dinner, and you go to bed all in the same room. So this is shot at 3 o'clock in the afternoon with blue gelled strobes in the background, blue gelled strobes bouncing off the ceiling, and an orange gelled strobe stuck in the shoji lamp and severely underexposing the available light and just letting the flash go. And so it's as bright, it's a mid-afternoon shot, but it's day for night. So this kind of problem solving is what they used to pay us the big bucks for. Now they don't pay us anything, but we still have to solve the problems. So we bounce flash off walls and ceilings for a natural look, because the larger the light source in relation to the subject, the size of the subject, the softer the light. That's why when you go outside on a day like today and the sun is a small little, dot in the sky, that's a very harsh light. But when a bank of clouds comes in between the sun and the earth and you get that beautiful soft light, that's exactly what we're doing with bouncing our flash. We're taking a little small specular source and we're making it large. In this case, this paper maker in Amalfi, he works in this white plaster vault, so I'm just shooting up into the corner. A Kathakali dancer in southern India, bouncing the flash off the ceiling, shooting into the mirror. I did a story for Smithsonian on high water in Venice. And not only in the winter sometimes when the acqua alta, the high water comes, not only do you have to pay about $16 for a latte in these places, but they have to issue you boots to go in on. And this is a portrait of the manager with all the boots that he maintains for his customers that he's gouging for $18 a cup of coffee in St. Mark's. Bouncing small flash through that little white umbrella for a close-up of a Kathakali dancer. So we use walls, ceilings, little umbrellas, and that's why a flash that will articulate easily is your friend. So any flash that you buy that's kind of locked, aimed in one way, that's not what you want. A fashion show in Shanghai just after the rules on this kind of loosened up in China. Portrait here. Again, we've bounced the light off the ceiling. We've got a slow shutter speed to burn in the lamps. This is John and Virginia Duncan. They were also characters in Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. And this is my last slide. And we're bouncing the flash off the wall here in Bali. Any questions? Thank you very much for your attention. All right, thanks a lot.
Whether you're a hobbyist or a professional, B&H has the answers to your questions. Experience a world of technology at our New York City Superstore. Connect with us online or give us a call. Our staff of experts is happy to help.